And we have Michael Deniger, who's born and raised in Vermillion, graduated from high school here in 2009, and then somehow got up to Brookings and graduated there 4 years later. And we don't hold it against him. He's a good guy. And so after he graduated, he went into the Peace Corps, and he's going to tell us about his experiences in Armenia, where he served there for 2 years. And he's in the area of international development, and he's going on to graduate school at the University of Denver starting next fall. And probably the highlight of his CV, though, is he is a graduate of the bike helmet program of Vermillion. He got his own second grade bike helmet back in 1999. So without further ado, Michael Deniger.
All right, real quick, I got a little crap for being from SDSU, but since we had to give $1 for every team that participated in the NCAA tournament, I'm sorry, but South Dakota State made it, so I'll put this up here. And since they lost to the number 2 team, we're basically ranked number 3 in the nation. All right. So yeah, as you said, my name is Michael Deniger. I graduated from Vermillion, born and raised here. I've actually never been to a Rotary meeting before. When I was in high school, like Dave and Cooper here, there was like a snow day or something like that on my day to be here, so I've actually never been here. I know quite a few of you. I at least recognize a few faces and all kinds of stuff like that. So, I'm here to talk about the Peace Corps. A lot of people think, why would you ever want to do that? First of all, how many people can remember when the Peace Corps was founded? I'm sorry if I'm going to date a few of you. Okay. So, for those of you who don't know, the Peace Corps was founded in 1961 by JFK. It was an idea to go out and introduce people to different cultures in the world. This was shortly after the United States had become a true world superpower after World War II, and we didn't want to just have military interventionism be the only option for our young people to get out into the world, see different cultures. We wanted to have a non-combative, soft diplomacy option. The hard diplomacy, obviously, is the military, and Peace Corps was the introduction of that soft power. So that was introduced in the State Department, and now it's run by the State Department. So hopefully Rex Tillerson will do a wonderful job in making sure that we can keep our funding and go around the world, because this year and last year the numbers for the Peace Corps applications have been through the absolute roof, and everybody wants to be a part of it, apparently. And to be a part of the Peace Corps, generally they request you to have an undergraduate degree, but there's actually no age limit on it. So if anyone in here is retired or looking to have a mid-career change, you are more than welcome to join the Peace Corps and do all kinds of fun stuff. So the modern Peace Corps is split into 4 separate categories: health and human services, agriculture, community and economic development, and education. So those are all pretty self-explanatory. Health and human services, medical stuff, nurses go over to different countries. The Peace Corps is in about 100 countries right now, from Southeast Asia to South America to Africa, Central Europe, and Eastern Europe, Central Asia, all over the place. So medical people are extremely valuable. Agriculture, all kinds of sustainable farming. For those of you who don't know, there's parts of Africa that have just been labeled as famine countries, such as Somalia and South Sudan. So they are trying to get Peace Corps volunteers into these places where it's actually safe for them to be, so that we can create sustainable agriculture. Community and economic development was actually what I did. And that sector is to go into communities, make sure they can start businesses, they can have fair trade laws, they can have civilians making sure that they're not getting taken advantage of, they know their workers' rights, things like that. And education, this includes absolutely everything. People go and teach English as a foreign language. They'll work with Spanish-speaking communities, are probably the biggest group under the education field, because there's so many people in America who speak Spanish and are capable of doing that, and it just umbrellas from there. So, one of the things up here, I have the modern Peace Corps. One of the ones right there, it says apply directly to a country or let it be to fate. When I joined, you couldn't pick which country you wanted to go to. So once again, if you're looking to do it and you have a specific country, you're like, oh, I'd really like to go to Uzbekistan, right? We want to do that. And you can go into the Uzbekistan thing and see, oh, they have health and human services, they have agriculture, or whatever they have, you can directly apply to that job. When I applied, I was like, hey, I graduated with an undergraduate degree. I have majors in history, political science, and global studies, so I'm extremely employable in today's market, so I would love to be a part of the Peace Corps. And they kind of tell me, well, you're right, that's not employable at all. So they asked me to do community and economic development. I actually applied to teach English as a foreign language, but they felt like my experience was a little more useful under the economic field. So I was sent to Armenia for my 27-month commitment to work as a community and youth development specialist. So the Peace Corps Armenia program was established in 1992. What happened in 1991? Anyone want to throw that out? Yeah, the war in Armenia, that was a thing. I was looking more for the fall of the Soviet Union. But so the Soviet Union fell in 91, so obviously after that happened, the United States was like, we want to get in there, we want to make sure that we are participating in this development. We want to make sure that we are helping them because, as those who just said it, there was a war in Armenia at this time. They considered it the Dark Ages. They had an hour of electricity every day. They had no support from Russia anymore. Azerbaijan didn't like them, Turkey didn't like them, for all kinds of different reasons. So they were in a really bad way. And today, the programs consist of the community and youth development that I did and the teaching English as a foreign language, or TEFL. If I refer to it in the future as TEFL, that's what that means. There also used to be a health and human services thing where they would actually go in, because in Armenia, if anyone is in the medical field, you would walk around and you would visibly be able to see people who are malnourished. There were grown men, even today, who are this tall, because after the fall of the Soviet Union, the only thing that they could eat is vegetables and whatever animals they could hunt. So basically it was just potatoes, because that was the easiest thing for them to cultivate, and a lot of them are very malnourished from their birth and all kinds of other things. They have since discontinued that program, partly due to the economic development within the country, and they're able to get better food and stuff like that. Also, when you start telling a bunch of 50-year-old people that they've been brushing their teeth the wrong way their entire life, they start to get a little irritated at you. So the Armenian Department of Health asked us to stop doing that. So, as you can see, in 2016, there were 115 Peace Corps volunteers. I was one of them. There are 7 regions, I believe, throughout Armenia, and we were based all around them. Can anyone guess how large Armenia is? Does anyone know? Does anyone know where Armenia is? I'm sorry, I didn't even actually say that. This is gonna be a classroom style. Who can do it? Yeah? Oh, you don't want to say? Armenia is located straight east of Turkey and south of Russia in the Caucasus region. So if we know where that is, this country is roughly the size of New Jersey. So it's a pretty small place. They have 3 million people there, and about 1.5 million of them live in the capital of Yerevan, right in the middle. So we had 115 volunteers, roughly a little over half of them, 60%, participate in schools, teaching English as a foreign language. And the other 40% of us were working with youth nonprofits, community nonprofits, trying to develop the region for all kinds of different programs. All right, when you get into the Peace Corps, you start applying. For me, I applied in July of 2014. I got my acceptance letter in 2013, and I got my acceptance in April of 2014. So it's quite the lengthy process of even applying to get it. When I got it, I got a little email saying, welcome to Armenia and all that stuff. And then for the next 4 months, you have to go through a battery of medical things. You have to fill out all of your insurance. You have to fill out all this paperwork that says if you die, your family promises they won't sue the Peace Corps, all kinds of stuff like that. So what they do is they get you all together in either Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., or Los Angeles, and then they just send you somewhere. So I was, of course, going to Armenia. I met in Washington, D.C. I got to meet a few of the people that I would be spending the next 2 years with. We were there for a day. They gave us a 30-minute language course, threw us on a plane, and sent us overseas. So it was really exciting. We all felt really confident about what we were doing and where we were going. And once again, teaching English as a foreign language, that's really clear. All the people who were there were like, boom, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to teach English. Me, they're like, you're working with communities and youth. I was like, what does that mean? So all of us in my sector, we were all kind of confused about exactly what we would be doing there. And so we fly over to Armenia. It's like we had to have a long layover in Vienna. So we actually land in Armenia at 3 a.m. And so it was very tired. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. The airport is actually really nice. So they proudly say it's an international airport, even though they don't have any regional airports. So they're all excited about that. And we get on the buses, and they're like, we're going to go to a tourist site real quick so we can be there for the sunrise. And we're like, okay, we've just been on a plane for about 12 hours, but sure. So we get to this place. We stop there. We get out. We take a pretty picture. It wasn't actually this place because I didn't get the picture that we had. Actually, it was that picture. This is the place where we went at 6 in the morning. The sun rose. It was beautiful and everything like that. They put us back on the bus, and they're like, oh, by the way, at 8 o'clock, we're having language training. So we go to a hotel. We spend a few days there learning about 3 hours worth of the language. We learn a little bit more about the country. We meet some locals. We get to know what towns and villages we're going to go to for the next training. And I was located in a village that looks very similar to this. I know it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but everything's just dirt roads. All of the houses were built in, I think, 1968, and they were all more or less clay and mortar with some bricks and stuff like that. On the outside, they're not exactly the most visually appealing houses in the world. You get inside, and it's actually fairly comfortable. But when we get there, we were given to our host families who don't know any English. These are communities where they're mostly farmers, or maybe like a teacher, or they do something for the local government, or they have a little store. So they know no English. And we get put with our host families. This is actually the second host family that I was with. This is the father and then his father as well. So it was Gavorg and Gavorg, actually. I think they were both named Gavorg. And I get there, I get off the bus, and everybody's meeting their families, and the woman who's in charge of our host families tells me to shake the hand of this guy because he's the guy I'm going to stay with. He turns around and starts yelling. He's very upset. I apparently made him upset for some reason. So he started yelling at the woman who was in charge in Armenian, and I had no idea what was going on. Everybody was getting in cars and driving away. These ladas, all these things that you see in the stereotypical Soviet movies. So I'm sitting there with my backpack, no idea what's going on. They're like, we're just going to send you somewhere else real quick. Don't worry about it. And I was like, okay. So I actually went with another volunteer, and I got to go to their house, went to his house. His host mother obviously spoke no English. We spoke no Armenian. She served us some strange milk thing that had parsley in it. Turned out to be pretty good. So after a few hours, the coordinator came back, and she was like, okay, here's the deal. We're going to find a new host family for you because the family you are going to stay with, we're expecting a young blonde woman from the United States. So, yeah, that wasn't going to quite work out so well with me. So then I went to my next host family. They were wonderful people. Their homes are just as comfortable as anything here. There's a few little discrepancies that you might have to deal with, like outhouses or squat toilets, things along those lines. So just a few adjustments that we kind of had to deal with without having the language, without having these trainings or anything like that. So for the next 3 months, almost all of us Peace Corps volunteers were in the same town, working together, trying to figure out how we were going to help this country. We learned the language, we learned cultural training, we had job training. We figured out the local laws about what we can do as a nonprofit, how we can train people, things like that we should not get involved in politics, that we should not get involved in like policing and stuff like that. Pretty straightforward things in all reality, but they still felt like they should tell us because it's the government. They need to make sure that we don't do anything stupid. So we lived with our host families, and then we occasionally had cultural excursions. We went around the country and got to see some cool stuff that the country has and is available. So as we're doing that, hold on. So during this training, we're told all kinds of stuff. We learn the language, and hold on. Sorry about this. Gotta make sure I got all this going. So yeah, we learn about the language and the culture. This is what the Armenian alphabet looks like. For those of you who are really good at counting really quick, that's 39 characters for their language. There is no other language in the world that uses this alphabet. And there are roughly 6 million people in the world that speak this language. And of those 6, there's only really 4 of them that speak it fluently. So it's obviously a very useful language. When you're done with the Peace Corps, I was kind of hoping that we would learn Russian, but nope. We learned Armenian, and I am proud to say that I am 1 step away from fluent in this language. So after 2 years of working there, it was pretty exciting. The Armenians are people who are very proud of their culture. They are one of the oldest cultures in the world. One of the biggest things to prove that they are the oldest culture in the world is this mountain right here. It's called Mount Ararat. Does that name ring any bells to anybody? Okay, cool. I don't even have to talk about that. Yeah, so that is the mountain that Noah's Ark landed on. So the story is that Noah landed on Mount Ararat, walked down the hill in the eastern direction, and planted the first grape seeds in the world. So then, of course, Armenia invented wine as well. So they are very proud of that and make sure that all of the French people who come and visit know that they were the ones who invented it. They're very proud. They want to make sure that everybody knows. All right. So, also, they're very proud of their cognac. I don't know if anyone knows this, but Winston Churchill actually would get his cognac shipped from Armenia to England because that was the only cognac he would drink. I have seen no documented proof of this, but every Armenian person told me that, so. All right, so as far as the actual works goes, as I said, there's 3 months of training, learning the language and all of this stuff, and it's very intensive. It's 4 hours a day of language, 6 days a week. You can imagine that gets a little tiring when you have to learn 39 new characters. You have to live with a host family who doesn't speak your language. Sometimes there's children in the house that, I'm sorry for people who have kids, they're so hard to understand. Like, kids in general are just hard to understand. They talk really fast. They don't understand that you don't know what they're saying. So if they're doing it in a language you don't understand, you might as well not even be trying to talk to them. So all of this stuff is very stressful, trying to figure out the cultural exchanges. Like, for example, my host family would give me like 16 bananas every day to like go have lunch, and I would only be gone for like 4 hours, and I would bring home like 4 bananas, and they'd be like, why didn't you eat all the bananas? We gave this to you, was it not good? And I'm like, oh, it's just too much food. So like these weird cultural things are things that we're all trying to get through, trying to deal with, and all that stuff. So after these 3 exhausting months, we are sent off to the parts of the country that we will live in for the next 2 years. So I was lucky, I was able to go to a town called Savan, and on this map, so we see this lake right in the middle, and I was just right on the northern part of it. So I was lucky I had beachfront property in the Soviet Union. The organization I worked with was called the Savan Youth Club. Once again, as I said earlier, we didn't really know a whole lot about what we'd be doing for our jobs. And when you hear Savan Youth Club, you obviously know that they're a very specific group. They work with youth, but anything else than that, I was really confused about what was going on. So we worked with them doing a lot of business development, like making sure that people were able to apply for jobs. They knew how to write a resume. They knew how to go out into their communities and look for jobs. They knew how to go online and apply for jobs, things like that. I also had an English club that I taught myself, kind of came up with my own themes for it. I had kids who were 8 years old who didn't know a word of English. I had adults who didn't know a word of English. We had those, and I also had a group of students who were very good at English. They'd been studying it for a while. They had tutors, so it was just really good having that range of English speakers. And then finally, one of my pet projects was a program called Teaching Our Boys Excellence. This was a gender equality and leadership camp. For those of you who don't know, Eastern Europe is still a very patriarchal society. If you are a woman, you are not allowed to leave the house for more than a couple hours without your father's permission or your brother going with you. If you want to apply for a job, you have to make sure that your dad is okay with it or your husband is okay with it, all kinds of other things. And it's very difficult for women to get integrated into the business culture of the country. So the point of this camp is to get young boys who are being taught that this is the okay way, and we tell them that no, you should look towards women as like your equals, and trying to figure out exactly the more respectful way to actually live within their society, because there's of course a bunch of other terrible things that happen with that as far as the sexual assaults and things like that. And this is just supposed to be a way for us to expose them to a different idea. We had female counselors at this as well from the United States who treated them in a way that they've never been treated by a female teacher before, because they still have corporal punishment in their schools. I don't know if any of you are teachers. I'm sure you might kind of like that to be there sometimes. But in this country, that's still completely allowed, and it's not the greatest way to teach kids to be accepting of a lot of people. So this was one of my programs. It was funded through USAID. It was absolutely wonderful. It was a week-long camp. All the kids loved it. I was in the Boy Scouts. I actually got my Eagle Scout Award, and I took a lot of my knowledge from that and applied it to this camp. So it was an absolute blast, and we did it in Armenian, in English, and it was just an absolutely wonderful time. So really what a lot of my stuff is teaching young people how to prepare for their future. Like in the Soviet Union, in the post-Soviet Union, there's all kinds of questions. The unemployment rate is in the 20%, if not higher in a lot of other places. So a lot of people are very questioning of what their futures are, and just giving them those tools and the confidence to know that they can still do stuff is huge within this work. All right, so then a lot of the next questions are, a lot of people like to know, like, what did you do? But mostly it's, where did you live? What was it like? This was my apartment. This was an apartment built in 1965. So you can kind of tell it's been dated a little bit. I was very lucky. I had a sit-down toilet in my apartment. A lot of people weren't that lucky. I did have water for 6 hours a day, running water, intermittent electricity, internet, all kinds of stuff. I did have internet, so that was nice. Phone service, all kinds of stuff. I only had a gas stove to heat my apartment with and a little gas grill burner. So when this was built, this was one of the nicest apartments in the country, since this was about $75 a month for me to rent this place. But yeah, more or less, it was a very nice place. My neighbors were all very welcoming of me, even though they were very confused why a single man over the age of 25 was living in their country and didn't want to get married to an Armenian woman. So it was lots of discussions came from that. So then finally, the kind of attitude of what it's like to be in the Peace Corps. We got to celebrate American holidays. We actually had to work on every single American holiday. So Christmas, we had to go to work because Armenians celebrate the Orthodox Christmas, which is January 6th. So we had to go in on Christmas Day, teach them Christmas words, or teach them the culture, how we celebrate Christmas, because of course it's very different. Armenian holidays, there's one called Vardavar, where they just fill up buckets of water and throw it at each other. I did not go out of my house after the first time experiencing that. So all kinds of things like that. For those of you who don't know, also the Soviet calendar of holidays is very generous as far as holidays go. New Year's is basically a month straight of no work. The official days are from January 1st to January 15th. But if you work in a nonprofit and it's a place that doesn't get heated very well, you just take all of January off. So I didn't have a whole lot to do during the Christmas period. A lot of volunteers, we try to get together, we travel around the country, we see all the sites. For those of you who don't know, Armenia was the first official Christian country, so they're very proud of that, they're very proud of this history, and they have churches. You'll be driving along in a taxi and they'll be like, oh, there's a church up there. And you're like, oh, how old is it? And they're like, it was built in like 890 AD. So it's a church that's over 1,000 years old, and for them it's just like, oh, that's the church we have, no big deal. So it's just phenomenal to see all of this history that goes back through different centuries, through different eras of the world, and all kinds of different things. Then also, the travel kind of helps keep you sane. Once again, Armenia gets a little cold, so sometimes during the winter you just sit in your apartment all day for multiple days on end, and if you're like me and you don't work in January, it's always cold, it's always nothing to do, you can't move a whole lot. So the travel really helps keep you functioning for the whole 2 years and everything like that. So I was lucky enough to go visit the country of Georgia and Greece and Europe and all kinds of other stuff. But yeah, other than that, that's all I really had as official stuff. And I was hoping there would be lots of questions that we could fill everything else up with. So does anyone have any questions for me?
Yes, are there other countries that have a program similar to the Peace Corps?
Yeah, so the European Volunteer Service is the European Union's response to the Peace Corps. It's a lot shorter period of time. You don't have to learn the local language, and it's selected by country. So everyone in the European Union has to participate in this, but then every country has to set up their work with other countries. For example, the European Volunteer Service in Armenia mostly had volunteers from Hungary, Poland, and France. Then the German volunteers would go to Africa, the Spanish volunteers would go to South America, Norwegian volunteers would generally go to Southeast Asia. So I mean, they have it, but it's a little more selective and it changes how the program works.
How many total people were in the Peace Corps worldwide when you were there, and what was the average age of them?
Worldwide, I believe it was about 2,000, I think, worldwide. Average age, I think, is actually about 32, I think, when you take all of it into account. A lot of it is undergraduates who have just graduated from college and are looking to get some work experience like myself. So, but there's also a huge amount of people who are doing their kind of like, not midlife crisis, but they're kind of trying to change careers or do something that like gets them out of the 9-to-5 business work ethic. They get to go visit a new country and learn about a new culture. And then a lot of retirees go as well. So, I mean, runs the whole gambit.
Did you have to get your own financial support to go, or?
No, actually, I probably should have covered that. Peace Corps pays for everything. Once you go there, it pays for your flight to get to the country. It pays for your flight to get to the meeting point. So it paid for me to get to Washington, D.C., paid for me to get to Armenia, paid for me to get to all the towns. And then every month I get a $300, or I got a $300 stipend for rent, utilities, phone, food, clothing, all of those things. So theoretically, you should never have to spend your own personal money while in the Peace Corps, unless you want to do vacations or things like that.
How about access to the internet?
Access to the internet in Armenia, it was actually really good. It wasn't as fast as it is in the United States, but it was more or less fairly reliable. There are countries where it's not as accessible, like parts of Africa and Mongolia, for example. It's a lot more difficult in those places.
Not a question, but a comment. One of our professors here is from Armenia.
Yeah.
He teaches linguistics and also Lakota. So in case you wish to practice,
I will have to stop by. Well,
Mozayan.
Mozayan? Of course.
Arabic Mozayan.
That sounds like an Armenian name, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, and I'm sure Michael will be around afterwards to answer any more questions you might have, but thank you very much.